Amanda clutched her purse against her chest like it could protect her as she scanned the underground auction room. A woman named Dae-hjeon was leaning close to her ear with wide, frightened eyes. "Do you understand what happens to witnesses here?" Amanda's fingers went cold around the strap of her purse. She did understand. That was the problem. She had taken exactly one step toward the nearest exit when a hand settled warm and firm at the small of her back, and a voice, deep, unhurried, spoke from directly behind her. "Why are you questioning my wife?" Silence fell so fast it was almost physical. Amanda turned slowly. The man from the hotel corridor stood beside her. One hand rested at her waist, possessive and completely calm, like he had been standing there for hours. The chandeliers caught the sharp lines of his face. Every person nearby had taken a half step back without seeming to realize it. This was Dae-hjeon, and the word wife was still hanging in the air above Amanda's head like a lit match. She whispered it before she could stop herself. "You're what?" Amanda Park did not belong here. She had taken a simple delivery shortcut through the luxury hotel 2 blocks from the clinic because the last train had already left and her feet were burning and she just wanted to get home. She had stepped off the elevator on the wrong floor, and then she had seen things she was absolutely not supposed to see. Terrified staff frozen against a wall. A shape beneath a white cloth near the service corridor. Whispered Korean too fast for her to fully follow. And a single bloody cufflink, gold and monogrammed, that had somehow rolled beneath her shoe before she instinctively scooped it up and shoved it into her purse without thinking. She had tried to walk back to the elevator. Calmly. But the doors at the end of the corridor had opened, and a man had stepped through them with the kind of quiet authority that made the entire hallway seem to tighten. Tall. Dark suit. He had looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then the rival syndicate men had appeared from the stairwell behind her, and everything had moved too fast for Amanda to process. If you're already feeling the tension, drop a comment right now. Stay with us. It gets so much better. Dae-hjeon's hand tightened slightly at her waist. Not painfully, but enough. His eyes did not move from the man questioning her. "I don't repeat myself," he said simply. The man stepped back immediately. Dae-hjeon, who had gone completely pale, bowed once and disappeared into the crowd. And, just like that, the room resumed around them, glasses clinking, low conversations, the subtle theater of criminally expensive bids as if nothing had happened at all. Amanda stood perfectly still and said, through the side of her mouth, "You need to explain what just happened." Later, Dae-hjeon said, "Now would be better." He finally looked at her. Direct. Unbothered. Later, he said again, and guided her toward a private table in the far corner of the room like she was made of expensive glass, and he had been doing this for years. She sat down because her legs decided that independently. Ji-ho, a younger man with sharp eyes and a tablet tucked under his arm, materialized at Dae-hjeon's shoulder and leaned close. "The Kim delegates are watching." "Let them," Dae-hjeon said, settling into the chair beside Amanda, not across from her, beside her, close enough that their arms nearly touched. Amanda stared at the table and counted her options. There were none. She had accidentally walked into an underground syndicate gathering with a dead man's cufflink in her purse, and the most dangerous person in the room had just publicly introduced her as his wife. Leaving now would raise questions she could not answer. Staying required performing a role she had never auditioned for. She picked up the water glass in front of her and took a long, controlled sip. Dae-hjeon watched her. "You're not panicking," he said. "I'm panicking internally," Amanda said. "I'm just also a medical student. We learn to do 2 things at once." Something moved briefly across his face. Not quite a smile. Gone before she could name it. "Good," he said. "That will help." Aaron returned to the table quietly and bent toward Amanda with a small velvet box. "For the role," she murmured. Inside lay a necklace, delicate gold chain, a single dark stone that Amanda was fairly certain cost more than her parents' car. Amanda looked at it. Then at Dae-hjeon. "I'm not wearing that." "Wear it," he said. "I'm not one of your possessions." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I know." He picked up the necklace, stood, stepped behind her chair without asking, and fastened it at the back of her neck. His fingers were warm against her skin. He was close enough that she could smell the faint cedar of his jacket, and for approximately 4 seconds, Amanda Park, who had survived 2 years of pre-med examinations and 3 consecutive nights of no sleep, completely forgot how breathing worked. He returned to his seat. She did not say anything. Dae-hjeon, watching this from 3 feet away, noted privately that Dae-hjeon adjusted the necklace 3 more times over the next hour. He had never seen the man fidget in his life. The auction proceeded around them in layers, coded language, formal nods, numbers communicated through minor gestures between men who had been doing this since before Amanda was born. Political favors. Black market agreements. Criminal alliances dressed in evening wear. Amanda had enough context to understand the shape of what was happening, even without the specifics, and she kept her expression carefully neutral throughout. Dae-hjeon, meanwhile, said almost nothing to her. He did not need to. He adjusted her chair before she could do it herself. He placed his jacket over her shoulders when the room cooled without asking whether she was cold. When she reached for the menu, he had already quietly ordered the things she had been looking at. When a server placed the desserts down, she ate 3 of them in a row, stress and hunger combining into something she was not proud of, and Dae-hjeon signaled for more without comment. She caught him watching her laugh at something on the menu. Quietly. Carefully. He looked away the instant their eyes met. Dae-hjeon leaned toward him and said, very low, boss. You've never smiled at negotiations before. Dae-hjeon said, be quiet. I'm just. Dae-hjeon. Dae-hjeon was quiet. Amanda pretended she had not heard any of that. The first real test came an hour in, when a man named Director Shin moved through the room like he owned it, silver-haired, wide-shouldered, the kind of man who smiled while he calculated. He stopped at their table without being invited, and looked at Amanda the way someone examines an unfamiliar artifact. I wasn't aware Dae-hjeon had a wife, he said pleasantly. We're private, Amanda said. How long? Amanda opened her mouth. Dae-hjeon said, long enough, and placed his hand over hers on the table. Director Shin's eyes dropped to their hands. Then back up. Forgive me, he said, still smiling, and moved on. Amanda waited until he was out of earshot. Then she turned to Dae-hjeon. You could have warned me someone would ask questions. I assumed you would answer them. Based on what? He looked at her steadily. You didn't run in the corridor. You didn't scream. You assessed the room before you did anything. That is not a person who freezes under pressure. Amanda stared at him. He went back to his water glass. She thought about pointing out that her heart had been running at approximately 140 beats per minute since the moment he put his hand on her back, but she decided that was not information she needed to share. By the time the auction moved toward its second session, she had learned 3 things about Dae-hjeon Kwon. 1. He listened to everything, including conversations 3 tables away. 2. He had an extraordinary talent for communicating authority without raising his voice. 3. Every single person in this room was afraid of him, and he was spending an unusual amount of attention on a medical student from a private clinic whose stress ate desserts. She could not figure out why. Later, much later, in the small side room where Dae-hjeon had quietly set up a space for Amanda to gather herself, she finally asked him. She had been watching him stand near the window, jacket still, completely unreadable, and the question came out before she had weighed it properly. Do you control everyone like this? He turned to look at her. Only people I intend to keep alive, he said. That's not comforting. He paused. It was not meant to be comforting. Amanda crossed her arms. So, what is it meant to be? He did not answer that. He looked at her for a moment, the kind of look that felt like he was calculating something complicated, and then said simply, you should eat more before the 3rd session. That is not an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. She wanted to be frustrated with him. It was genuinely difficult, because he had also just placed a full plate of food on the table beside her without her noticing when he had arranged it, and it was exactly what she would have ordered herself. Over the next 2 weeks, Amanda told herself she was waiting for the situation to resolve. For Dae-hjeon to handle whatever political fallout the night had created, and for her to return to her normal life. Clinic rotations, late-night studying, instant noodles at midnight. Instead, she started noticing things. The cafe near her university where she studied every Thursday had been quietly bought out, the ownership changed, the prices dropped, and 3 new exits appeared in the renovation that followed. Dae-hjeon told her, awkwardly, that the renovation was for structural reasons. Amanda knew what structural reasons looked like. Those were not structural reasons. Her morning run route had been subtly altered, barriers in convenient places, and a new lighting fixture on the corner she usually passed in the dark. She had not asked for any of it. When a classmate named Hyunwoo asked for her number after a study group, he received a phone call from an unknown number 20 minutes later. He did not ask again. He could not explain why. Amanda had a strong suspicion. She called Dae-hjeon. "Did you threaten my classmate?" Silence. "He was persistent," Dae-hjeon said. "He asked for my number." "That is a normal human interaction. He was also watching you for 40 minutes before he approached." "That is called interest," Dae-hjeon. "Normal people experience it." A longer silence. "Then, I see. You know normal men just say they like someone, right? That seems inefficient." Amanda pressed her hand over her face. "I need you to hear yourself." She could feel him frowning on the other end. Not with displeasure. With genuine confusion, as if she had just explained a concept from another dimension that he was patiently trying to translate. "I will consider it," he said finally. He sent her a watch the next morning. The card read, "Thinking of you." Dae-hjeon had clearly written it for him because the handwriting changed halfway through. Amanda put the watch on. She told herself it was because it went with her outfit. She was aware that was not the real reason. The real reason crystallized 2 nights later, when Dae-hjeon came to find her at the clinic after hours. She looked nervous in a different way than before, not the sharp fear of that first night, but something quieter. Something that came from knowing too much. "There's something you should see," Dae-hjeon said. The file was thin. A surveillance photograph, clinic exterior, timestamped 3 weeks before the auction. A figure in the background of the shot, Dae-hjeon, partially visible, looking toward the entrance. Amanda's chest went strange and tight. "Why," she said carefully, "does he have a photograph of my clinic from a month ago?" Dae-hjeon hesitated. "Dae-hjeon." "There was a delivery worker," Dae-hjeon said. "Last winter. He came in with a hand injury. Nothing serious, but nobody would help him. He was in delivery clothes, no card, it was late. Every other staff member said to send him to the public hospital." She paused. "You stayed 2 hours past your shift to treat him. Didn't charge him. Called him a taxi home." Amanda remembered that night. She had been exhausted. The man had been embarrassed about coming in. She had given him antibiotics, wrapped his hand, and found him one of the protein bars she kept in her locker. Standard. Normal. The kind of thing you did because he was a person and his hand hurt. "He worked for Dae-hjeon," Dae-hjeon said quietly. Amanda stared at the photograph. She found him in the main corridor of the clinic 20 minutes later. She did not know how he had arrived that fast or how he had gotten through security clearance, but she was increasingly understanding that those kinds of questions had unsatisfying answers where Dae-hjeon Kwon was involved. He was standing very still, which was his default state. Amanda held up the photograph. "So this wasn't random," she said. "That night at the hotel. You didn't just choose the nearest person to protect." He looked at the photograph. Then at her. "No," he said. "You already knew who I was." He did not flinch. "Yes. You decided I belonged near you before that night even happened." The corridor was very quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in a steady, mechanical rhythm. Dae-hjeon said nothing for a long moment. And then, with the same precision he applied to everything else, no softening, no deflection, "Yes." Amanda exhaled slowly. She had expected this to feel like a trap closing. It did not feel like a trap. It felt like standing in an open doorway and finally understanding the view on the other side had been there the whole time. "You watched someone treat a person with kindness," she said, "and you found it so unusual that you couldn't stop thinking about it." He looked away from her for the first time. Just slightly. "When was the last time someone looked at you like a regular person?" she asked. He did not answer. She already knew the answer anyway. The final gathering of the auction collective happened on a Thursday evening, a closing ceremony that was not called a ceremony, but functioned as one. Drinks. Formal acknowledgments. The careful redistribution of power between men who would never write any of it down. Amanda stood beside Dae-hjeon in the center of the room and understood that this was the last test. The Kim delegates had been watching all week. Director Shin had been asking questions through channels that Ji-ho monitored carefully. And a man named Vice Director Lim, the rival Dae-hjeon, had been strategically neutralizing all week, had been saving something. He delivered it now. In front of the full room. Voice pleasant, designed for maximum exposure. I've heard the wife speaks Korean imperfectly, he said. That she appeared without warning. That no one in any of our networks has documentation of her existence. She's pretending. He looked directly at Amanda. Isn't she? The room went very quiet. Amanda felt every eye in the space settle on her like physical weight. She looked at Dae-hjeon. He was watching her, not the room, not Vice Director Lim. Her. His expression was controlled as always, but she had spent enough time near him to read the slight difference between his public stillness and the current version. He wasn't moving. He was waiting. Not to protect her. Not to intervene. He was waiting to see what she would do. Amanda turned back to Vice Director Lim and said, clearly and without hesitation, "You're right." The silence deepened into something absolute. Then she walked across the open space between her and Dae-hjeon and took his hand. She looked up at him. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face, something open, unguarded, something that had gotten past whatever gate he kept everything behind. At first, Amanda said, "I was pretending." She did not look away from him. "Now I'm not." Even Ji-ho forgot to breathe for a moment. Dae-hjeon, who had negotiated with the heads of 5 criminal families without blinking, who had ended careers with single phone calls, who had never once in Ji-ho's entire memory of working for him lost visible composure, looked at Amanda Park with something close to undone. His hand tightened around hers. Just barely. The room erupted in low, cautious murmuring. Vice Director Lim had no remaining ground to stand on, and he knew it. He smiled tightly and retreated into the crowd. Director Shin raised his glass from across the room in a small, acknowledging gesture. Ji-ho turned very carefully to the window and looked at the city outside and thought about how strange the world was. 3 weeks later, Amanda's study books were spread across the low table in Dae-hjeon's penthouse because the cafe was under renovation again, legitimately this time. She had checked, and he had offered the space with the same tone he used for everything. Matter of fact, unbothered, as if it were simply logical. She had her notes on renal pharmacology. He had whatever it was that Dae-hjeon Kwan handled at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. They had reached a silent agreement about the space that involved her taking the corner by the window and him taking the far desk, and neither of them discussing it as an agreement. She was on her 3rd page of notes when the elevator opened and he walked in, jacket still on, looking like he had spent the evening doing something that would not be discussed. He came to where she was sitting. Set down a container of food beside her books. Said nothing. Amanda said, without looking up, "You know normal boyfriends text first." I sent security. She looked up. He was completely serious. Dae-hjeon. That is not the same thing. He looked genuinely, slightly confused. The expression on him was devastating in a way she had not fully prepared for. "I am learning," he said, with the same careful gravity he applied to everything, as though learning how to text a person before arriving was a strategic initiative he had assigned appropriate resources to. Amanda looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up, closed the distance between them, and kissed him. It was not dramatic. It was not perfectly timed. It was simply her, finally deciding, and him, after exactly 1 second of absolute stillness, responding with a certainty that felt like it had been waiting for months. When she pulled back, he was looking at her with that unguarded expression again. The one she was fairly certain almost no one alive had ever seen. "I'm still independent," she said. "I know," he said. "And I'm finishing medical school. I would not suggest otherwise. And you're not sending security to my study groups." A pause. "The cafe is sufficient," he said. She pointed at him. That is not a yes. It is not a no, he said. She was about to respond to that when the elevator opened again and Dae-hjeon walked in, looked at the two of them standing approximately 4 inches apart, and said, with admirable professionalism, "Boss." The Osaka families arrived early. Amanda turned to look at Dae-hjeon. Why does that sound threatening? Dae-hjeon straightened his jacket. Because it is. Amanda turned back to her books, sat down, and began flipping pages with the energy of a woman who had accepted, fully and without confusion, that her life had taken a turn she was not entirely unhappy about. I need stronger coffee, she said. Dae-hjeon, retreating tactfully to the elevator, permitted himself exactly one small smile before the doors closed. If this story kept you watching till the end, you already know what to do. Like this video, subscribe for new episodes every week, and drop a comment below, Team Amanda or Team Dae-hjeon. Let's see who's winning. Thanks for watching.